Hi, this is Philip, and in this video I'm going to cover making changes, alternate versions, and snapshots of your content in GitHub. These actions represent some of the core version control features of Git, which is the underlying technology of GitHub. And although they were designed primarily for collaborating on software, they're great for collaborating on other types of content too. So let's jump in with the easiest one first, making changes to the main version. This is probably the most similar to what we think of as saving in other content editors. So by default, when you create a repository in GitHub, it's going to be on what they call the main branch. So it's sort of the main version. And so if I want to come in and edit a file that I'm already working on, go into edit mode, and let's say I want to just add some content as a block quote here, and I can preview that, see how that looks. So what we would call save normally is called a commit, and so this is saying I want to actually commit to this change that I'm trying out here on my content. I can give it a note, added a block quote, and you can see here it defaults to the option to commit directly to the main branch. So this is basically going to kind of overwrite the existing version of the content. So I hit commit changes, and if I come up here to the history of this particular file, I look at the history, I can see right here the history of all the changes on this file. So there was the first draft that was committed yesterday, and then you can see the change that I just committed today. So in one particular file, you can always see, every time you make a commit and what your comment is, on that change. And in this way, you can always go back and see previous versions and even roll back to previous versions if you need to. So now let's look at creating alternate versions. So let's say you've started down a path with your project, and then you want to explore something that's significantly different, but you don't want to mess with what you've already started. So you can create a new branch, and the nice thing is you don't even need to do this ahead of time. This can be just something that happens in the context of your editing. So let's say I'm not sure about the sequencing of this content, and I want to try something that's sort of very different than what I had before. In this case, I'm just reordering some things, get rid of some extra line breaks there. I can preview it, so I can see I've moved the block quote and the link up here and left the other content down there. So instead of, when I want to commit these changes, instead of going to the main branch, I can decide to create a new branch, which is a new version. And I can call this, reordered content. And you can see over here in this node, it's going to create a new branch called reordered content. So I will hit propose changes. Now it's going to drop me right into what they call a pull request. And I'm going to actually just ignore this for right now. I'm going to go back to the code tab. And you can see now that I have two branches. So in addition to the main branch, I have the reordered content branch. And there's also this note telling me that that branch had recent changes and I can compare them. So again, these now represent two completely different versions of the same project. If I go look at this file in the main branch, you can see this had the order of the content that I had previously. And right up here, if I switch over to the reordered content branch, you can see now there's a different version of this file. So these kind of exist in these sort of parallel universes. Now if I decide I've gone through this exploration and I like this one and I want this to become the main one, you can do what's called merging it in to the main branch. And you can see there's kind of a quick way to jump into that here. So in this pull request kind of dialog, I can see here on this branch, reordered content, that there was one commit here, and you can see what actually changed. They show you sort of the difference in the file. So in this version, this stuff was down here. This has essentially been deleted, and you've had these new lines added up here, so you can see what the result of this new branch would be. So I'll go ahead and create the pull request. Now what this does is it sort of creates the opportunity to now collaborate on these proposed changes. They're basically proposed changes at this point. And if you're collaborating with other people, you can add them as reviewers, and they can look at the commit log. They can see, which files were changed and what happened, and they can add comments right in here on individual lines and sort of leave a review, and so really engage in sort of a conversation about the changes and whether you want to merge them in or not. But let's assume that you want to just go ahead and merge them in. So we can hit merge the pull request. We confirm that. We can see that it was successfully merged and closed. And at this point, you actually want to delete that other branch. We won't go into all the details about that now, but just know that you're safe to delete it. And if you want to create alternate versions later, you can always do that on another branch. So if we go back here, we see there's no more open pull requests. And if we go back to the code tab, we can see there's no other branches now. We just have the main branch. And if we look at the commit history for the repo, the project, we can see the changes that happened there. And then you can see this merge that happened from reordered content into the main branch. So now we're back to where we've started with having a single branch with our latest changes. Now the last thing I wanted to cover is taking a snapshot of your project at different points that may represent meaningful milestones. So in software, they call this a release, and you have things like version numbers. But this can really be used for any point in your project that you want to sort of easily mark out from other versions and make it easy to sort of describe, share, and return to. So let's say I sort of like where I am now. I'm going to continue to work on it, make changes, but I like this point that I'm at, and I want to make some notes about that. So I can create a new release. You're going to do what's called a tag. So every release has sort of a name, and this can be anything. They give you some suggestions here about semantic versioning, but this can really be whatever you want. So you could say like, my favorite version so far, and we'll just create a tag called that. Favorite version so far for a title. We're just titling the release here. This is just what it's gonna, what will show up in the sort of release notes. So you can add some release notes here. What I like, this, that, the other thing, and go ahead and hit save, or I can't actually see the button, publish release. And so you can see under my releases now, I've got this favorite version so far tag. It creates a zip file of all the files in your project, your repository. So you could always download this. You could always come back to this and use this as a starting point later. And so if we go back to releases here, you can see I just have one release on the releases page. And if I go back to the code tab, you can see now there's one branch and one tag. So this tag sort of represents another version of the project. Now if I want to go on and continue making changes, I would go back to my main branch and I can create changes from here. So just really quickly to show you how that looks. This is like a change after release. Change after release in my commit note. And so if we go back to the code tab and we look at the commit history of the whole project, you can see I have my previous changes, the merge here, and then the change that happens after the release. If I go here and look at this tag, you can see this tag stops at this merge commit. So it includes everything up to there, but not beyond. And so that's all we're going to cover for now. Again, this was all about making changes, alternate versions, and snapshots of your content in GitHub. And I hope you found this helpful.